You wake in a palace that stinks of lavender, urine, and something darker. The candlelight dances across walls draped in gold-threaded tapestries, but the air betrays the illusion. Sweet rot creeps in under every velvet curtain, seeping from the man whose bedchamber you approach. Welcome to the darker side of history. The smell will hit you first. Sickly sweet, like rotting fruit crushed under silk slippers. Then the sound. Slow, rattling breaths through a collapsing throat. If this kind of raw historical storytelling moves you, go ahead and like the video and subscribe. No fluff, just facts and fear. Tell me where you're watching from, especially if you're alone, in the dark, in silence. Now, brace yourself. Let's walk into the shadows. You move closer. Behind that thick oak door is Henry VIII, King of England, once the lion of Tudor pride, now a beast devoured by his own body. You smell it before you see it. Gangrene, ulcerated flesh soaked into feather-stuffed cushions, obscured beneath crimson robes too fine to be removed. They dare not undress him anymore. Even the physicians flinch at the peeling layers, the pus-filled bandages, the gurgling wound that will not close. The year is 1546. The end has begun, though no one can say it aloud. Even now the king must not be seen as weak. And yet, every cough, every wheeze from behind that door cracks the palace with fear. He rules still, but in name more than flesh. You watch his attendants, men once proud to be near him, now avert their eyes, hands trembling as they pour wine or wipe drool from the king's trembling chin. You walk behind a servant carrying a pewter basin. It's half filled with dark, clotted fluid. The smell again. Closer now. His leg, his infamous leg, has burst open again. A sore the size of a plate, oozing through bandages, rotting him from the ground up. Scholars call it a jousting wound that never healed. Some say syphilis, others suspect diabetes. The truth is hidden beneath layers of myth and rotting tissue. The once mighty king wheezes a command, and all movement stops. His voice, barely more than wind dragging over gravel, summons his surgeon. No scalpel touches him today, not while he screams at ghosts in the rafters. You notice the silence. No music in the palace anymore. No falconers, no laughter. Only shuffling, slippers, and whispered prayers. The dancers have all gone home, and the fools are buried. You are in a living mausoleum, gilded and vast. Henry's flesh balloons unnaturally. At nearly 400 pounds, he can no longer ride, stand unaided, or even relieve himself without assistance. He urinates in golden pots held by squires who were once knights. Every step of his day is managed by men too terrified to admit he's no longer capable. Still, they fear him. Still, they obey. In private, his physicians pen letters soaked in dread. One, Dr. Butts, wrote of the mood swings and melancholy that no leech or poultice could mend. Another described dreams Henry screamed about. Visions of beheaded wives, fields soaked in blood, and men with molten eyes. One particularly strange account, fringe, dismissed by many, tells of a monk's warning years before. A rot shall consume the king's body as the rot consumed his soul. It was whispered in Canterbury, then never again. Historians still debate whether Henry's leg truly killed him, or if it was his mind. Madness, they say, creeps in with power. Paranoia blooms in isolation. And for Henry, whose court once echoed with pageantry, now every corridor whispers only fear. You descend a level, into the stone underbelly of the palace. The food stores are full, the wine is imported, yet the king eats alone, biting into meat. He can barely swallow, swearing his cooks are poisoning him. You recall the feast he once held for Anne Boleyn. Dozens of dishes, fountains of wine, fireworks bursting above the Thames. Now he glares at soup and hurls silver plates at the wall. You are summoned to his chamber again. It is time to change. The linens. 4 men are needed just to roll him. The skin on his back tears like parchment. He does not cry out. He no longer notices pain, at least not this pain. He moans the name Jane. Jane Seymour, the wife who gave him a son and died too soon. Her portrait still hangs where he can see it even now. Perhaps she is the only one he mourns, or perhaps she is the only one who never disappointed him. There's an old superstition among the palace staff. Never walk alone past the king's door after midnight. Some claim to have heard chanting. Others swear they saw a pale woman in Tudor, dress, face gray, eyes weeping blood. They say she walks the halls Henry once ruled with thunder and charm. Now he rules only memories and shadows. As you wash your hands in rosewater, you see your own face reflected in the copper basin. Pale, drawn, too close to this dying monarch. You wonder if he even sees you anymore. Does he know who you are, or does he see his brother, his father, his ghosts? The tiles beneath you sweat in the winter chill. A draft carries the stink deeper into the palace. You step away, into the corridor, and take a breath. But the air is no cleaner out here. Henry's decay is not confined to his chamber. It leaks outward, into policy, into punishments, into the very language of England. This is no longer a man. This is the corpse of an empire still pretending to breathe. And still, he speaks, demands reports, dictates letters. Every parchment that leaves this room carries his trembling signature, smeared by a hand too bloated to grip. He insists on hearing the names of enemies, real or imagined. He growls about the French, about the Pope, about his own daughter Mary, whom he half trusts, half fears. You watch him drift into another fever. His eyes roll back. A nurse swabs his mouth. He whispers something in Latin. No one knows if it's a prayer or a curse. You close the chamber doors behind you. They groan shut with finality. You press your hand against the wood. Feel the heat pulsing from within. There's a sound you'll never forget. A low, guttural cry. Not of pain, but of knowing. Of knowing this is the end. And knowing no one dares to say it. You are inside the palace, but it feels like a cage. The stone corridors grow colder, heavier, like they're tightening around you. Torchlight flickers but cannot chase away the creeping dread. You swear the shadows move faster than the flames. Every servant's step is hushed. Every glance is a dart of fear. And above it all, perched like a rotting god on a throne of silence, sits Henry, bloated, breathless, and brimming with suspicion. The man who once danced, who once sang, now cannot bear the presence of anyone for more than a moment. His council members approach like prey. They bow low, not out of reverence, but to avoid the unblinking stare that seems to pierce bone. You've seen it. Those bloodshot eyes flicking between faces, parsing every syllable, seeking betrayal in the inflection of a greeting. The wives are all gone. 2 by death, 2 by divorce, 1 by miscarriage and mercy. The last, Catherine Parr, still lives. Barely. You pass her once, in a shadowed archway. Her face is pale, but her spine is steel. She whispers Latin psalms under her breath, not out of devotion but as armor. Even she is not safe. Not anymore. You move through a hall where the windows are bricked up, sealed not by renovation, but by fear. Henry ordered it. No one knows why. Too much light, he'd muttered. Perhaps afraid that God himself might look in the privy chamber. The king commands fewer visitors by the day. His barber no longer trims his beard. It grows wild, gray-streaked and matted. His personal fool vanished months ago. Some say he died. Others say he laughed too long during one of the king's rages and was dragged to the tower. His bell still hangs in the corner, mute and waiting. You approach a group of servants kneeling in a side hallway. They do not pray. They listen. The king is speaking again, not to them, but to voices only he hears. His words are muddled, guttural, strung together like tangled roots. Traitor, Seymour, blood. Mary's eyes. Edward must burn. You are told not to speak of what you hear. The walls now have memories, and even they cannot be trusted. And the smell. Always the smell. No matter how many bundles of dried herbs they hang from the ceiling beams, no matter how much incense they burn, nothing can conceal the scent of decay. A scholar, once bold, described the palace air as suffocating in its sweetness, as if perfume had been used to paint over rot. He was dismissed the next day and never seen again. Outside the king's bedchamber, there's a tapestry Henry once adored. It shows a lion tearing down a dragon, symbol of England's victory over chaos. Now the lion's eye is stained dark, not from ink, from blood. A servant tripped with a chamber pot 3 months ago, and the tapestry was never cleaned. You think they left it as a warning. Inside, Henry mutters about plots. His fear is constant. His guard doubles weekly. No one touches his food but the Lord Chamberlain. And even he is watched. Silverware is counted. Doors are barred. The gates of Whitehall are closed by nightfall. And no visitors are allowed without 3 layers of approval. It is not a court anymore. It is a siege. One bizarre rumor filters through the staff. Henry has begun to burn letters unopened. His seal lies unused for days at a time. When messengers arrive, he screams at them, calls them specters. Some say he believes the dead are writing to him, that Anne Boleyn sends him notes written in her blood, cursing his name for eternity. Historians still debate whether this was true madness or calculated cruelty. Was he unraveling, or simply reminding everyone that even you are asked to accompany a noble to his final audience? The man is sweating before he reaches the door. When the guards knock, the king does not answer. Instead, there is a crash, a goblet thrown. The noble steps back. You step in. Henry is seated, unmoving. His eyes fixed on a blank stretch of wall, mouth half open, as if tasting silence. On his lap lies a book, but the pages are torn. His fingers are stained with ink and something darker. When he sees you, he does not blink. He only says one word. Gone. Gone, he repeats. Gone. The noble flees. You remain a moment longer. The king closes his eyes, and for the first time, you see it. The flicker of a man terrified not of death, but of irrelevance. He once ruled storms. Now, he cowers from shadows. In the lower kitchens, the mood is tense. Cooks whisper about the night sounds, chains dragging, voices murmuring just out of earshot. One claims to have seen the silhouette of Anne Boleyn on the upper stairwell, her head intact, her hands reaching for Henry's door. Another says Queen Catherine Howard's screams still echo from the walls. She was barely more than a child when she died, after all. You listen, but you do not mock them. After what you've seen, it's easier to believe the dead walk these halls than that the king remains fully alive. One night, as the wind howls against the palace eaves, you are summoned unexpectedly. The king wishes to speak. Not to a counselor, not to his heir, to a servant. You enter alone. He is upright, unnaturally so, arms resting on chair arms like a man prepared for battle. His eyes glisten, not with tears, but with something colder. Resolution. His voice is rasp but direct. Do you believe in judgment? He asks. You do not answer. He leans closer, and for one moment, one breath, his royal mask slips. His lips tremble. I see them, he says. The ones I made disappear. They never stop watching. You are dismissed. But the echo follows. You down the hallway, watching, watching, watching. That night, lightning cracks above the Thames. A window shatters somewhere in the west wing. The king doesn't stir. But the palace groans like it remembers. And so do you. You no longer dream. Sleep comes in fragments, broken and scattered like the mind of the man you serve. In Whitehall, even rest has turned into a vigil. You lie awake, listening for footsteps, for cries, for the scraping of iron against stone. Because here, under Henry's dying reign, no sound is innocent. Every breath might carry warning. The king's health decays by the hour now. You see it in the way his hands tremble, in the long pauses between thoughts, as if he's forgetting what it means to be a man. His leg, once a minor wound, has become something biblical. The smell wafts ahead of him. It's as if death has already claimed part of him and is waiting for the rest to catch up. Physicians are summoned daily. They arrive solemn and leave, pale. The wound won't close. No balm can soothe it. Pus drains through soaked cloth, and yet Henry insists on dignity, refuses a cane, roars at those who offer one. He moves only with the help of an elaborate pulley system constructed above his bed, a rig of ropes and levers that lifts his bulk like a carcass in a butcher's stall. One morning, you find him screaming at the ceiling, not in pain, but rage. He claims God has betrayed him, that the angels now whisper to Mary, not him, that Edward, his son, is surrounded by wolves in lambskin, that Elizabeth, his daughter by Anne, will rise and erase his name from time. The clergy arrives. They pray in tight clusters, not for his healing, but for his clarity. One whispers to another, "The king's soul will not leave quietly." And it won't. He raves now about ghosts who visit nightly. Jane Seymour, his third wife, stands at the foot of his bed. He speaks to her, smiles even. But when he turns to speak to his guards, his voice hardens like iron. "There is a reckoning coming," he tells them, "and I will rise again to watch it. It's not just the king who is haunted. You are haunted now, too." In the gallery, a painting once removed is mysteriously returned. Holbein's massive portrait of Henry, young, virile, broad-shouldered, is rehung on the eastern wall. You pause before it often. The eyes follow. The mouth seems about to move. And every night, the torches beneath it flicker without wind. Decay. Guards refuse to walk past it alone. One swears he heard it sigh. A more bizarre rumor spreads next, that the king is having his own death mask prepared before his last breath. A wax artisan from France is summoned in secret. He arrives cloaked, silent, and is shown to the king's chamber. What he sees, he never says. But when he leaves, he is visibly shaking, and boards a vessel back to Calais without accepting payment. You overhear a noble mutter, "He has already become a relic." Another adds, "or a warning." In court, people wear masks, not of cloth or gold, but of behavior. No one speaks plainly. Every word must be calculated, neutral, indirect. For one misstep can draw the king's wrath, even now. Especially now. His paranoia has become a contagion. It spreads like the rot in his leg, deep into the bones of the palace. Historians argue whether this period, these final feverish weeks, were governed by Henry at all. Some say the council ruled in his name while he drifted through fits of madness and lucidity. Others claim his will was never stronger, only darker. That he used his illness to cement control, to make his death into a stage, his silence into thunder. And still, his obsession with succession sharpens. Edward, barely 9, is to be king. But Henry sees threats in every shadow. He interrogates visitors about Edward's diet, his tutors, even his dreams. "Keep him away from Catherine," he mutters. "She's too clever." Then he forgets, and asks why Anne Boleyn hasn't been by to see him. In a fevered haze, he demands to see Mary, his oldest daughter. You are present when she arrives. She kneels. The air between them is weighted with years of betrayal, annulment, banishment. He opens his arms, and for one moment something human stirs. But when she stands, he mistakes her for Catherine of Aragon and weeps bitterly into her cloak. Mary does not speak of it afterward. The documents pile high now. One after another, death warrants, orders of silence, revocations of favor. Henry cannot sign them all. His grip falters. So a new seal is forged, an instrument of final tyranny. With it, the council can authorize anything in his name. The power of a dead man, wielded by the living. One scribe, trembling, notes, "He is not gone, but we write as if he is." And amid all this, a dark mystery blooms. A priest found drowned in the ornamental pond. No sign of struggle, but his lips are purple and his eyes are open. A note in his sleeve reads, "The lion does not sleep. He waits." No inquiry is launched. His body is burned without ceremony. There are whispers of curses now. That Henry made a pact long ago to live forever, as a shadow over England. That he walks in dreams, that his breath clings to the throne itself. One lady-in-waiting claims her reflection vanished while dressing in a mirror near the king's chamber. She has not returned to court. One night the fire goes out in the king's chamber. The hearth always burns, always. And yet, in the middle of winter, it is cold, freezing cold. You arrive with fresh coals and find the king huddled under furs, eyes wide. "They tried to drag me under," he says. You glance around. No one is there, but the floor beneath your feet feels colder than ice. There is no longer day or night in Whitehall, only shifts of shadow. Servants no longer whistle. Guards no longer sing. The tapestries droop. The dogs whimper and sleep far from the royal wing. You wake one morning to find the corridor outside your chamber filled with rose petals. No one knows who placed them. But the king's nurse swears that night she saw Queen Jane walk the hall again. This is the end. You feel it like a storm in your bones, and yet it does not come. Henry clings, each breath a war, each hour a sentence stretched into eternity, and you wonder, what kind of man can keep death at bay through sheer spite? You watch the king's body betray him in slow motion, a grand monument crumbling beneath its own weight. Each breath he draws is a laborious conquest, as if the air itself conspires against him. The room, thick with the scent of rotting flesh and stale sweat, is a tomb illuminated by flickering candlelight that casts monstrous shadows along the stone walls. Henry's face, once proud and commanding, has sunk into a grotesque mask of suffering. His skin is mottled, bruised with purple and black patches, like bruises blooming beneath his royal flesh. The flesh around his ulcerated leg has turned a sickly green, swollen grotesquely, pulsating with each heartbeat. The chamber's stale air is heavy with a metallic tang, the unmistakable scent of decay creeping closer each day. You are no stranger to the king's fury, but now it is the fury of a dying beast. He rants in fragments, mixing historical triumphs with delusions of conspiracy. His voice cracks like ancient timber, but the menace in it never fades. When he shouts, the walls themselves seem to shudder. A disturbing whisper snakes through the corridors, that Henry is haunted not just by his enemies, but by something darker. Servants speak of strange occurrences, the flicker of shadowy figures slipping through the halls, the sound of chains dragging over stone floors when no one is there. One maid swears she saw a pale man in Tudor garb watching her from the gallery, his eyes hollow and accusing. One bizarre rumor clings like cobwebs, that the king's physicians, desperate and perhaps fearful, resorted to bleeding him not just with leeches, but with blades forged from meteoric iron, metal believed to carry celestial power. They hoped to draw out the poison from his leg, but some say this only worsened the curse that gripped him. As Henry's mind unravels, you witness moments of terrifying lucidity. He commands a council meeting from his bed, issuing decrees with a pen that shakes in his trembling hand. The words are sharp, laden with paranoia. "Trust no one," he orders. Even those closest wear masks. Historians still debate whether these moments of clarity were genuine insight or the ravings of a dying man clinging to the last threads of control. Some argue his madness was a political tool, others say it was pure collapse. But to you, standing in that oppressive chamber, the line between sanity and madness blurs into shadow. The king's body is failing, but his spirit claws at the fabric of reality. One night, he demands to see his favorite hawk, a magnificent bird of prey, long housed in the royal aviary. The hawk is brought to his bedside, wings clipped, eyes sharp. Henry reaches out a trembling hand, and for a moment, his eyes shine with something like life. But then the bird screams, a piercing, unnatural sound that echoes through the chamber, and flaps wildly before collapsing dead into the king's lap. The room falls silent except for Henry's ragged breathing. This event sends a ripple of fear through the court. The hawk was a symbol of royal power and freedom. Its sudden death in the king's presence is read as an omen. Some whisper that Henry's soul is trapped, like the bird's wings clipped and unable to soar. A scholarly dispute lingers over Henry's mental state during these last days. Was he truly descending into madness, or was he strategically playing a role? A final performance to ensure his legacy. Letters intercepted by his council hint at a man still plotting, still manipulating even as his body rotted. You find yourself doubting your senses. Sometimes you catch fleeting glimpses of Henry in corridors long after he is retired. His ghostly form seems to drift through walls, eyes burning with unspent fury. The palace itself feels alive with his torment. Every stone a silent witness. One night, as a fierce storm howls outside, you hear the king's door slam shut with a force that shakes the chamber. You rush to the hallway and find no one there. Yet the air vibrates with a terrible energy, like the echo of a scream trapped in time. Despite the decay and dread, Henry remains obsessed with his succession. He orders the drafting of his will, dictating every clause with feverish intensity. The fate of England hinges on these fragile sheets of parchment, scribbled in a hand barely able to hold the quill. A strange episode unfolds when the king requests the presence of a young boy rumored to possess prophetic gifts, a child whispered to see the future in his dreams. The boy is brought to the bedside, and Henry stares into his eyes for what feels like an eternity. Then, with a voice barely audible, he warns, "Watch the throne after me." Shadows gather. You wonder if the boy's visions were true, or a product of desperate hope. Meanwhile, the court becomes a pressure cooker of intrigue and fear. Courtiers jockey for favor with the king's dwindling strength, while others plot quietly in the shadows. One nobleman is found strangled in his chambers, an anonymous note pinned to his chest. Traitors fall. You hear whispers of secret, meetings in the dead of night, where lords speak in hushed tones about a kingdom in peril. The line between friend and foe dissolves into suspicion. As Henry's death approaches, the palace grows colder, both in temperature and spirit. Servants speak of hearing mournful singing drifting from the chapel, though no one is there. Candles flicker and gutter without cause. A pervasive sense of doom hangs over every corridor. You are exhausted, haunted by visions of a man who was once a king, now a shadow of himself. The king who broke with Rome, who wielded power like a sword, is reduced to trembling whispers and spectral rumors. His last hours are spent in a stupor, punctuated by moments of sharp clarity that cut through the fog like a knife. He mutters about legacies, betrayals, and a kingdom that must endure beyond his suffering. And then, finally, the slow, terrible silence descends. The air hangs heavy with the scent of decay and sorrow as you enter the chamber once more, now silent, but for the soft crackling of dying embers. The king lies still, his immense frame finally stilled by the relentless march of death. His face is pallid, waxen, a grim mask that speaks of battles lost to time and disease. The oppressive weight of his absence presses down, filling the space where his commanding presence once dominated. The faint echo of his last breath seems to linger, a ghostly reminder that the tyrant has fallen. You step closer and see the strange markings etched into the wooden bedpost. Cryptic symbols, possibly scratched by the king himself in delirium, or by some desperate servant trying to ward off the darkness. These runes have baffled historians for centuries. Some claim they were protective talismans. Others insist they were curses meant to bind Henry's soul to the earthly plane. No one truly knows. This eerie ambiguity deepens the unsettling silence that grips the chamber. A single candle flickers low, its flame threatening to gutter out. Outside, the sky is roiling with thunderclouds, an ominous backdrop to the end of an era. You remember the reports of Henry's final hours, that his consciousness ebbed in and out, sometimes aware, sometimes lost to shadow. His last words, recorded by an unknown scribe, are fragmented and haunting. God have mercy on my soul, my kingdom, my sins. It is said that Henry VIII's death was not merely a physical collapse, but the culmination of a spiritual torment that racked him for years. The official records recount a king who struggled with gout, obesity, and a festering leg ulcer that refused to heal. Yet whispered legends tell of a curse laid upon him by a scorned woman from the early days of his reign. Some fringe historians suggest his illness was compounded by poisoning or black magic, though this remains fiercely debated. As you stand in the stillness, you sense the invisible thread that connects the king's turbulent life to the present moment. The shadow of his decisions, the break with Rome, the execution of queens, the relentless pursuit of power, still ripples through history. His death did not bring peace, it unleashed uncertainty, setting the stage for a nation on the brink. You recall that moment when Henry's body was prepared for burial. The ceremony was grand yet cold. The king was dressed in a heavy velvet gown, his face covered by a lifelike mask, a common practice meant to preserve dignity, but instead rendering him a silent, uncanny figure. The coffin was sealed, the heavy oak lid closing on a man who had been feared, loved, and reviled. A bizarre account from a contemporary chronicler describes how, just after the coffin was lowered into the vault, a strange green light was seen, flickering above the tomb. Some interpreted it as a sign of divine judgment, others as a restless spirit refusing to rest. The exact nature of this event remains an enigma, its veracity questioned but never fully dismissed. The debate among scholars continues about Henry's legacy and the true nature of his final days. Was he a visionary monarch undone by his own hubris and physical decline? Or was he a tragic figure ensnared by forces beyond understanding, political, personal, supernatural? The answers remain elusive, buried beneath layers of myth and history. In the quiet aftermath, you feel the cold truth settle in. Power is fleeting, and even kings must face the unyielding silence of death. Henry's life, marked by grandeur and cruelty, ambition, and madness, ends as all lives do. Alone, vulnerable, and swallowed by time. As you leave the chamber, the faintest whisper brushes your ear, an echo of a king's final plea, or perhaps a warning to those who would follow. The past lingers, a shadow that refuses to fade. You step back into the corridor, the chill of the stone walls grounding you. Outside, the storm breaks, rain pounding against the windows like a funeral drum. The age of Henry VIII closes in thunder and silence. You walk away from the king's chamber, the echoes of his suffering still reverberating within your bones. The weight of history settles on your shoulders, a reminder that behind every throne lies a human story marked by pain, ambition, and the relentless passage of time. The smell of dust and decay lingers, a subtle trace of the violence that shaped an empire and the fragile mortality of those who ruled it. In this quiet moment, you feel the heavy cost of power, a reminder that every crown casts a long shadow. The memory of Henry's torment reminds you that history is not merely dates and facts, but the raw, often brutal human experience that pulses beneath the surface. To remember is to honor those lives lived in the harsh glare of fate's unforgiving light. And as you step into the fading dusk, the whisper of the past trails behind you, a ghostly breath on the nape of your neck, urging vigilance. The story does not end here. It waits, restless, in the shadows. A chill wind murmurs through the corridors of time. Beware the legacy of King